everyone. It's very good to meet you. My name is Valentina, and I am the founder of Daye. We are a platform for gynecological health management, which is dedicated to ending the gender research gap and creating a novel, better healthcare system for women and AFAB individuals around the world. I started my company when I was very young, which gave me a competitive advantage in the sense that I was able to make a lot of really dumb financial decisions in order to finance it in the beginning. I was 22 when I had the idea about Daye, which meant that I had a very high risk tolerance for my personal financial well-being, and as a result funded the company on credit cards to begin with. Which is not financial advice, and please don't take it as such. In fact, take it as the opposite of financial advice. But the reason why I'm so excited about the space of gynecological health is obviously through my own personal experiences. I had my first painful cycle when I was 9 years old, which at that time was considered really young. But now what we're seeing from the data is that women are starting to have their menstrual cycles younger and younger, which is why it's really important that we have gynecological health conversations with girls and women as early on as possible. This wasn't the case in my family or in my in my school. No one had had a conversation with me about what to expect, so I just assumed that I was dying. I didn't realize that what was happening to my body was my menstrual cycle. I couldn't realize that it was happening every month. I just thought that I would get these cyclical bouts of a mysterious disease. And as a result, kept it as a secret from my parents for about a year. Didn't tell them what was going on, which may sound like a very unusual story, but the more I've told it to different audiences, to my friends and my peers, the more I've realized how common this experience of your first menstrual cycle and of the gynecological health experience as a whole actually is. So these personal issues that I faced really opened up my eyes to how deep the gender care gap really is today. And the reason why I'm an entrepreneur in the space of women's health is that I feel gynecological health is the single most important challenge for us to resolve within our lifetime. It's a challenge that we have been passing on from one generation to the next for millennia. And if we want successful societies and successful economies, we really can't afford to have over half of the population not have their basic physiological needs be met. So what we're currently experiencing is that we have over half of the population, stuck at home with a hot water bottle on our tummy, or dropping out at the peak of our career performance in our 50s because of unmanaged menopause symptoms. If we want healthy economies and if we want healthy societies, women's health should come before space exploration, before AI, and before all of the other hype industries that we're typically that we're typically prioritizing. And I want to start my presentation here with an introduction to the gender care gap. So some of you might not be familiar with the fact that currently modern medicine knows very, very little about gynecological health and about the female physiology. This is largely due to the fact that women were excluded from clinical research up until 1993 in the United States and 1995 in the UK and Europe. This is from human clinical trials. Before we can even get to a human clinical trial, we typically test a pharmaceutical component in animal studies. And there again, researchers prefer male mice and male rabbits over female mice and female rabbits because we're so petrified of the menstrual cycle. So the scientific term for this is we want to avoid the pollution of data from the menstrual cycle. I think the word pollution here is quite poignant. It shows what we think about the gynecological health experience. It shows what we think about menstruation. And it also shows that instead of acknowledging that, yes, women go through hormonal fluctuations, just as men do, by the way, also go through hormonal fluctuations, we simply put the gynecological health experience, the hormonal cycle, to one end and assume, okay, let's just treat women as smaller men. Let's not recognize the physiological differences. And this is an issue in clinical trials, in medical devices, in pharmaceuticals, which is very active today. So this isn't an issue from the past. Still to this day, we have less than 20% of clinical trial participants globally be female. So all of the biotech, medical, pharmaceutical innovation that we're developing right now, it's targeted at male populations. It's not targeted at female populations. And this is also true when we're looking at medications that are specifically for the female physiology. And this is one example, ADI, the female Viagra, developed in 2016, so not a very long time ago. It was safety tested for its correlation with alcohol consumption in only 25 patients. And 92% of these 25 patients for the female Viagra, which men should not take, were men. Another key example of the gender health gap, in the way that I see it, is period and pelvic pain. Period and pelvic pain is a silent global public health pandemic. 90% of women experience some level of period and pelvic pain. 1 in 10 women have endometriosis, which is a condition associated with severe, debilitating period pain. That's more women than those who have asthma and diabetes combined. Yet we don't talk about endometriosis. It's very rarely spoken about or heard of. And we also don't talk about simple period pain or primary dysmenorrhea, the one that's not associated with an underlying physiological condition. Even though we know, this is a study also from 2016 from UCL, that the level of pain experienced by people who have period pain matches the intensity of a heart attack. Instead, since we're young girls, we're taught that period pain is normal, ignore it. If you can't bear your period pain, how are you ever going to survive the pain of labor? And the gender gap in healthcare shows up in another area very prominently, and this is disease diagnoses. So this is a study from 2019 from the University of Copenhagen, and keep in mind that Denmark has some of the highest levels of gender parity or equality within the delivery of healthcare anywhere in the world. Yet still, in very progressive Denmark, we're seeing that women get diagnosed later than men in across 700 different diseases. So for cancer, it's an average of 3.5-year diagnostic delay, and for diabetes, it's an average of 4.5 years. Similarly, for cardiovascular disease, about 50% of female patients with an active, ongoing heart attack that present to emergency rooms get turned away because medical providers are trained to recognize the symptoms of a heart attack that show up in the male physiology. The female physiology is different. We experience heart attacks differently. So when we show up to the emergency room with an active heart attack, we get turned away. And then narrowing down the gender diagnostic gap to gynecological health screening in particular, the main tool that we still use today in almost every gynecological health appointment is the speculum. So for the men in the room, the few men in the room, this is a metal device which is inserted into the vagina in order to keep it open. So it's very invasive, it's painful, it's cold. So that you can imagine the experience, you typically go into a clinic, you have to be half naked in front of a stranger, and then you have to put your feet up in these stirrups in order for the metal device to be inserted vaginally. It's incredibly painful, it's incredibly invasive. And the speculum, the design of the speculum, what you see on the screen, the golden one, was discovered in the times of the Roman Empire. So this is an actual speculum that was discovered under a volcano, so it was preserved. And what you see on the silver one is the modern speculum that's still utilized today. And you can see that we haven't really had a meaningful design upgrade to this tool, which is used in most every gynecological appointment. And finally, another key illustration of the gender health gap in research. So for conditions that are only affecting women, like endometriosis, we have a severe lack of research. We have a severe lack of funding. Only about 2.5% of our budgets in Europe to fund healthcare, to fund R&D, to fund innovation, only 2.5% go to the entirety of gynecological health. So 2.5% has to cover breast cancer, menopause, cervical cancer, endometriosis. It's obviously woefully insufficient. And whenever we're fortunate enough to get some of that share of funding for R&D and have it deployed towards women's health, female patients end up being the subject of over-sexualized studies because we still see the female body as underlyingly overly sexualized. So this, what you see on the screen, is one of the largest studies into endometriosis, which was publicly funded. and then published in a peer-reviewed medical journal. What this means is that the analysis from the study was reviewed by a number of different independent bodies, the grant funders, the researchers, the scientists in the publication, in the scientific publication. And they all decided that a meaningful scientific question for us to answer is whether women with endometriosis were deemed to be more attractive or less attractive when compared against women who don't have endometriosis. Now, I've spoken to a lot of endometriosis patients in my lifetime, and none of them have ever asked me whether I deem them to be more attractive or not. I genuinely don't believe that this is a meaningful scientific question. And to further illustrate the point about the over-sexualization of the female patient, this was the conclusion of the study. The criteria in which they chose to measure whether someone was deemed to be attractive or not were, do they have a small waist? Do they have larger breasts? And did they have sex for the first time at an earlier age? So this is the conclusion, as I mentioned, from one of the largest studies conducted in endometriosis, a condition that affects 1 in 10 women, so more women than asthma and diabetes. So this has been incredibly depressing, and thank you for not leaving my presentation. Now onto a brighter part of the presentation, which is what we can do to help bridge the gender care gap. The reason why I called the company Daye, D-A-Y-E, not only was it trademarkable, but also D-A-Y-E is the old spelling of the word day. We want to bring forward a new day in gynecological health that's brighter, more positive, and filled with potential. So I wanted to walk you through the story of how I had the idea for a company that makes novel medical and diagnostic devices for some of the most common gynecological health issues. So I started my research on it in 2017, fueled by my access to credit cards, not only in one geography, but actually in 2 geographies. So really put myself in a situation where I'll probably never be eligible for a mortgage, but here we are. And then in 2019, after the initial clinical trials, after I had asked my friends to send me money on my birthday instead of gifts so that I could file my first patent, I was able to fundraise, which by itself was a huge miracle because about 1% of the overall share of venture capital funding goes to the entirety of women's health. And only 2% of the entire global pot of venture capital funding goes to female founders. So I feel very privileged to have had this opportunity. And what we deployed the funding to was to set up our own manufacturing, build custom machines so that we could make our products in-house. And the products that we have, the main hypothesis that we have here at Daye is that we can repurpose the menstrual tampon to do a lot more than just soak up menstrual fluid. So instead of asking the woman, the patient, to completely change her behavior, adopt an entirely novel medical device, we instead use the existing behavior and add more value to it. So about 90% of people either use tampons on a regular basis or they've used a tampon before. So we made pain-relieving tampons and diagnostic tampons to help bridge some of the existing gaps within healthcare today. And in order to make them, we had to build custom machines. So we had to bring manufacturing in-house. The reason for that is a fun fact. Tampons are one of the last greatly monopolized industries out there. So there's currently only one company globally which makes all of the tampon manufacturing lines. And what this means is that for a product that's so ubiquitous, that's on every supermarket shelf, regardless of which brand you're buying, it's made on the same machine. It's the same underlying product. Yes, it might have a different color wrapper or a different color applicator or a nicer looking box, but this product, which is used by billions of women worldwide, is completely prevented from having any type of innovation because the manufacturing is so monopolized. So we brought manufacturing in-house, which enabled us to create a better tampon, one that's smaller, more absorbent, more sustainable, safer, but also to create the world's first pain-relieving tampon. So taking advantage of the fact that the vagina is a highly absorbent mucosal membrane, which means that when you deliver medications vaginally, you can use a lower dose of your active ingredient, you can create a faster onset, so the medication works faster, and it works for a much bigger percentage of the general population. So back to the point around women haven't been invited to take part in clinical trials. Most of the medications that we use for period and pelvic pain today were never designed for period and pelvic pain, nor were they ever tested on the female body. And when we launched the pain-relieving tampon, we learned that a key issue for our community was the huge diagnostic delay in understanding what's causing your period and pelvic pain. So in endometriosis, on average, there's a 7 to 12-year diagnostic delay. In polycystic ovarian syndrome, there's an 8 to 10-year diagnostic delay. This means that women are not receiving the treatments that they need, but they're also not receiving the answers that they need on what's happening to my body, why am I in pain? So we created a virtual clinic, the Period and Pelvic Pain Clinic, which uses a proprietary clinical algorithm to match your symptoms to a diagnosis and finally give the patient answers on here's why you have period pain and here's how you can manage it. And more recently, in 2023, we introduced what I believe to be our most impactful product. It's, again, a tampon, so you can see there's a theme here. This tampon is used for at-home STI, HPV, and vaginal infection detection. So it replaces the very painful invasive speculum exam, and it enables every patient to be in full control of their gynecological health. So instead of having to book an appointment, go to a clinic, be half naked in front of a stranger, you can be at home in your safe space and use a product that you already know and like. And there's two main advantages to the tampon. So the first one is increased sensitivity and specificity. That means diagnostic accuracy. Here again, there's the gender health gap at play. The swab, which you might remember from COVID times, the one that we used to put up our noses. This is what's used in vaginal screening today. Even though the swab was never designed for the vagina, it was designed for our nose, it was designed for our throat, and then like so many other components of women's health, it was simply repurposed. I call it hand-me-down innovation. So instead, we designed the diagnostic tampon specifically for vaginal use, and we were able to increase the rates of diagnostic reliability for STIs, and importantly, HPV. HPV is human papilloma virus. It's the virus that causes cervical cancer. On a global level, cervical cancer is the deadliest female cancer, but it's entirely preventable. And isn't that incredibly exciting that we live in a time where the deadliest gynecological cancer is also fully preventable through regular screening and regular vaccination programs? And if there's one moment of excitement and inspiration that you take away from my presentation, please remember, within our lifetime, we can eradicate cervical cancer. If everyone gets vaccinated, that includes men, by the way. Men should get vaccinated as well because they are the carriers of HPV. And if everyone gets screened regularly. And last year, we introduced our gynecological health clinic. So this is a virtual clinic that enables everyone to gain access to medical devices, diagnostic devices, prescription treatments, nurse consultations, and OBGYN consultations, again, all from the comfort of their home, regardless of whether they live in the EU, UK, or US, regardless of their insurance status. And the response that we've seen has been incredible. So in the UK, which is where I started the company, there's currently 700,000 women on a gynecological health screening waiting list. So they're waiting to see a doctor, they're waiting to see a provider. And imagine how much easier it would be if they could just go, click, book an appointment, and finally get answers to questions that they may have had for years. And we spoke about the fact that women have been excluded from medical research. And one of the core central missions of Daye is to create the research, to create the data which modern medicine needs in order to adequately diagnose and adequately treat the female physiology. So over the past 5 years, we've been working on creating the largest medical database and biobank, specifically dedicated to gynecological health. So anyone can contribute to it. You can donate your de-identified patient data to it, and we make it available to select academic institutions such as Liverpool Women's Hospital, the Mayo Clinic, who want to find answers to some of modern medicine's unanswered questions on gynecological health. And so far, we've served over 100,000 women across Europe, the UK, and the US. Last year, we were recognized as one of Time's best inventions for 2024, which is incredibly exciting when you think about the tampon as an incredibly stigmatized product. You know, usually when we go and change our tampon in the bathroom, we have to hide it in our sleeve or put it away in our pocket. It's not a product that we want to show off. So it was a very exciting moment for us to see actually a picture of the tampon featured in, you know, such a large and impactful publication. And over the next 5 years, our mission is to create an ecosystem where every woman, every AFAB individual has access to the tools that they need in order to manage and improve their vaginal, menstrual, and hormonal health. And the way in which we want to do it is with sustainability in mind, sustainability at the forefront. So by bringing manufacturing in-house, we could also create novel medical devices which would be significantly more sustainable than what is available on the market right now. So all of our tampons are wrapped in water-soluble applicators and housed in water-soluble wrappers, which enables us to save tons of non-recyclable plastic waste from ending up in our beaches and oceans. And next, we're expanding to sub-Saharan Africa, where the burden of cervical cancer in particular is incredibly high. We're starting with Nigeria and Tanzania by providing local populations with access to our diagnostic tampon for at-home HPV screening. So thank you so much for joining me today to talk about the importance of the gender health gap. And I hope you're able to take little pieces of information away, share it with your friends, share it with your peers, and take small actions towards this important public health goal. Thank you so much.